Greetings, traveler.
Hey guys, and welcome to my fourth Rise of Shadows meta update video. Let's dive right in. What has happened? Let's go to the official patch notes. You can see that's not a whole lot for this update. Now you can see that this was 3 days ago, so we do have some data already on HS Replay, which I will be going over in just a moment after this. But the statement reads, we have just updated the appearance rate of cards to ensure class balance remains close to the ideal 50% win rates. Specifically, the win rate of Rogue and Warlock should now be decreased. The win rate of Druid, Mage, Paladin, and Warrior should be increased. Card appearance rates for Hunter, Priest, and Shaman remain untouched. So let's dive into that very quickly. What do I think of that? I think that there's two or three things that don't exactly make sense. Well, first of all, it will be a lot nicer to get more information than this. How much stronger did everything get? Which cards did they... Well, I mean, how much stronger everything gets depends on which cards they target by how much they lower the appearance rate, etc., etc. But we're sort of used to this, and at least I'm happy that these nerfs aren't happening without any heads up. Before, this would be the case, and we would just have to be like, oh, well, I guess Rogue got nerfed because it dropped by 5% on HS Replay. So we're pretty happy that we get something. Now, it's far from perfect, but like we said, it's better than nothing. Now, as for the actual content, the nerf for Rogue feels... I'll pull up the stats so you can follow alongside with me. These are the current HS Replay stats. Now keep in mind that these are probably going to be different than Blizzard stats, just because these are the stats for people that use a deck tracker, not everyone or this specific deck tracker. But HS Replay is, or deck tracker is really popular, so we do have a lot of data, but it's not every player, of course. So keep in mind, this data is probably going to be a little different from what Blizzard has. Now, the nerf to Rogue is the first thing for me that doesn't really make too much sense, just because Rogue was fine, I believe, after the first nerf. They hit it really hard, and now you did not have that infinite miscreant value. You still had to really, you know, build... In my opinion, you had to build quite an aggressive Rogue, and it wasn't very easy to draft and not that easy to play. But it felt quite rewarding, whereas now I think they just murdered Rogue. It's currently number 8. I can't remember a time where Rogue was number 8 in the arena, especially in a tempo-oriented meta. For the class with the dagger to be number 8, the card offering quality has to be abysmal. So yeah, for now, probably want to stay away from Rogue. The second point that doesn't make too much sense to me is the increase in the Mage quality. I feel like Mage was... It wasn't overpowered, but it was not weak, just because Conjure's Calling is such an insanely strong card, and if you know how to work with it, you can get really, really consistent and strong decks. Now, I will say that for a lot of people, Mage was not that strong, so a reason for the buff for Mage could be that Mage is pretty much always going to be a popular class in the arena, especially for, you know, the people that don't have the deck tracker, the more casual folks. They just go, well, you know, Mage was always strong, Mage will always be strong, I'm just going to pick Mage. Or maybe it's even just from the point of view that, oh, I'm used to playing Mage, so therefore I will just draft Mage every time I can in the arena. And if you need to do specific things in order to make the class work, if the class doesn't just work the way it's always been, just pick Flame Strikes and stuff and you'll be fine, then I can see that Mage may have been underperforming in their stats and required a buff. However, for us, this will mean that we can probably start abusing the class and do really well with it. We'll dive into that later, what you can do to take advantage of this. Then the third point that I don't exactly get is Shaman being untouched. I think Shaman's okay right now, but I feel if you're going to buff Mage and nerf Rogue and then not... it just doesn't exactly make sense. You know, you're going to buff Druid and Warrior, but you're going to leave Shaman alone. It might be okay, right? I mean, whenever I draft a Shaman, the decks aren't terrible to me. It just feels a bit weird that we are going to buff Mage but leave Shaman alone. But we did talk about it. A possible reason for that might be that newer players pick Mage, and therefore the Mage stats may have just been worse than expected. because we don't have Blizzard's numbers. We just have HS Replay's numbers. Anyways, so far the little interpretation of what has happened. The purpose of the video, like I said, is we're going to focus on the top 5 classes. It has only been a couple days since the nerf has come out, but I will share with you guys what I have learned, what I have been testing. Okay, keep in mind that this is just a short meta update video and that the actual meta report will come out as soon as I have enough data and I feel comfortable making something a bit more in-depth and detailed, right? But in the meantime, I figured, you know, let's just keep you guys up to date on what I have been doing. All right, so it was a particularly good weekend for me in terms of stats. Let me have a look at my tracker. Quite some 12s. Let's start with Warlock, just because Warlock used to be the #1. We had a 12-0 Warlock deck right after the nerfs. So the first thing I wanted to do was check, okay, how bad is it? Is it still fine? And yes. We're at 12-0. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, Warlock will always be insane, but you can see that the deck we drafted had 1 Evil Genius and 1 Abyssal Enforcer. I'm assuming that that is still above average right now, but I won't know for sure, of course. I'll need to keep an eye on what my opponents are playing, what I see in my drafts. But I didn't want to spend too much time playing Warlock just because I had already done a lot of it for the chat draft leaderboard run. Warlock was the #1, so we pretty much had to pick it every time we saw it. So I want to taper back a little bit. I don't want to spam Warlock anymore right now, especially after the nerfs. But yes, the first deck we did after the nerfs was a 12-0. So I think the way to go is still a Zooey approach. You can see from this deck that is not super low curve. We have 3 Dread Infernals and the Abyssal. There's a Stormwind at the end. There's a Scribe. But this is not a control type warrior. A lot of these cards are still more aggressive cards, and they are there for us to have enough steam to close out the game. So this is still quite an aggressive deck, even though it has a bigger top end. There's no Shovel Fists in the deck. There's not that much, you know, dedicated AoE. What I do like is Dread Infernals and Abyssals, of course, which is AoE on a stick, and you can be aggressive with that. Especially Dread Infernals, super nice for the Scribes, but I still don't think that you should be drafting Control Warlock over something that has a better early game. My philosophy with Warlock is if you have a good start and you can push your advantage on the board, you are going to preserve health, and if you preserve health, you can then tap later on. Whereas if you play a Warlock deck where you draft less early game and you're more reliant on AoE to swing the board back, you are inevitably going to take more damage, and it's just going to get more awkward. Can it work? Yes, but why not just put stuff on the board early, fight for the board, keep a high health total, and then use the tap later on to outvalue your opponent anyway. All right, so like I said, we're not going to talk too much about Warlock. We've talked a lot about Warlock already, and there's lots of runs on YouTube as well if you want to check them out. Then let's go to the new #1, Hunter. It's always been one of my favorite classes, if not my all-time favorite. Right now, I would say that there are still 2 ways to draft Hunter, and I have been focusing a bit more on the off-meta variant, if you will. So the standard way to draft Hunter is a mid-range Hunter. Let me have a look if we have a good example of that here. Yeah, in general, Hunter, you want to draft, yeah, this is a good example, right, with the high main here. In general, for Hunter, you're still going to want to focus on your curve, so you're going to want to have at least 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop. If you have enough ones, that's also fine, but I'm usually not a fan of picking 1-1-drop. Usually I'd like to have at least 3 1-drops to just increase the consistency of having that on turn 1. So that's still my usual philosophy, is you either have like 3 1s or you don't pick the 1-drops very highly. Now that doesn't mean you can't pick any 1-drops, but especially something like a Fiery Bat. If you have 1 Fiery Bat, what is that going to do? Now, if you pick a Shimmer Flyer or a Web Spinner on the other hand, that still has some utility later in the game because it cycles itself into another card. But something like a Fiery Bat is pretty dedicated. You want that on turn 1 really badly. So that's just my take on things. One drops are fine, but only do it if you can consistently, you know, land the one drop on one, which for me, the number is I want to have at least 3 then. If you're not going to have any ones, then you pick more 2s just to increase the chance that you can coin 2 drops or play 2. Most of my decks are still going to have around 8 1 to 2 mana cards combined, usually 8 to 10. That's the number I want to stay on. If I'm going to be playing mid-range, I don't want to go too low curve. Then we add the 3 drops. 3 drops for me right now are a little tougher to draft just because I, generally speaking, don't want to pick too many animal companions. You can see this deck has 2 of them, but it's from the 4th of May. Since then, I have adjusted my drafting protocol, if you will, for Hunter, where Animal Companion is such a good pack that I've been picking up 3 drops somewhat highly so that I don't have to pick Animal Companion, and then I can pick higher quality cards, such as, well, Bow is still a 3 mana card, but you can pick up, you know, Unleash the Hounds or High Mane, and you won't have to pick Animal Companion because you're starved for 3 drops. So that's the strategy I'm using right now. That means something like a Carrion Grub, a 3 mana 2/5 is quite decent because it's still better than a 3 mana 3/3 or a 3 mana 2/4, and it's a beast. So if you do get a Houndmaster, you do have that synergy later on. So just something to keep in mind when you're drafting Hunters. Value decent 3 drops, such as, you know, the Spider Tank. We all know I love that. 3 mana 3/4s or Carrion Grab value that higher. I'm still not too big on 3 mana 4/3s just because they do die to 2 mana 3/2s, but at least in Hunter, you're probably going to have the board, right, where you play a 2 drop, so it's less likely they can trade into it. Nevertheless, it still dies to Deadly Point. Well, Rogue in the meta right now is probably not too prevalent, but you know what I'm talking about. 3 damage is just a lot easier to manage than 4. So very big on picking Spider Tanks when I can early, and Carrion Grub, a specific example, a 3 mana 2/5 I tend to pick as well. Then 4 drops, generally speaking, just come together. Super big fan of Soldier of Fortune in pretty much any deck right now. I think it's under bucketed. It's a 4 mana 5/6. You give them 1 or 2 coins on average. It is not that bad. It's combos really well with the Faceless Rager, the 5/1 that copies the health. It combos well with, say, a Hosen Healer, or there's just a lot of cards where, you know, you can one-shot a Yeti and they can't even ping it off. So very strong menu to drop on curve. Big fan of that. So usually you end up with, say, 4 or 5 4 drops as well. And then Marked Shot, I'm a big fan of in a mid-rangey Hunter. I'm actually a big fan of Marked Shot right now in pretty much any style I'm drafting. I'm not going... I'll show you guys the aggressive deck in a little bit. It's quite complicated. But Marked Shot just increases the chance that you're going to have enough cards to deal with whatever your opponent throws at you while just hero powering them down later on. I would not pick Marked Shot over Unleash the Hounds, but there's not very many cards that I would then pick over a Marked Shot other than Unleash the Hounds. So keep that in mind. That's definitely a card that I've sort of come around. At the start, I wasn't really sure whether I was going to like it because it is 4 mana to deal 4, but just the sheer potential to roll a Call of the Wild and somewhat just have, you know, infinite late game, or finding an Unleash the Beast, or finding specifically the card you need in any situation definitely has increased my evaluation of the card. And then from there on, you know, for a mid-range deck, you're going to pick maybe 3 to 4 5 drops, and let's say 2 to 3 6 drops. Still not a big fan of Shovel Fist. It doesn't allow you to hero power, and it's pretty clunky for the curve. So keep that in mind for a mid-range Hunter. Not a fan of the Fist, just like, you know, 5 drops and 6 drops for my late game to finish off the opponent. All right, so that's for mid-range. A very, you know, short summary. Keep in mind, you know, once the meta report is out, it'll be more detailed. Then the more exciting part, as I said earlier, these updates are still about telling you guys what I've been up to, and I really enjoy a specific type of Hunter, and for the purpose of, or at least for this expansion, I'll be calling it Aggro Control. I think that's the best name for it. These 3 decks were Aggro Control, so we had a 7, a 7, and a 9. Still figuring out exactly what I want, but it's a super fun archetype to draft. It is useful, right? Like I said, 2 7s and a 9, that is not bad. I do think that mid-range is more consistent, but if you see your draft trending towards aggro control and you don't mind trying it out, it is super fun when it does come together. So what is aggro control? The philosophy of the deck is I'm going to have a very good early curve to push damage with, and then I'm going to pick reactive cards to keep myself alive as I finish you off with the hero power and additional reach. So certain cards that look unplayable or bad in mid-range suddenly become pretty good here. So 2 cards in particular, Explosive Trap and Kill Command, become a lot better when you aggro control. Now, I've never been a big fan of Explosive Trap in mid-range Hunter. You can see that all 3 of these decks have at least one Explosive Trap. What does Explosive Trap do for this kind of deck? It stalls, because you want to usually play your Explosive Trap, say, turn 6, 7, 8. That's usually when you start playing them, when your opponent has at least 1 minion that dies to it. If they choose to not attack, then that's fine. They're not hitting you in the face. They give you more time to finish them off. If they do attack, which the vast majority of opponents will do, it's 2 mana, deal 2 damage to their board and damage to their face. So not bad when the goal is to keep yourself alive as you're pushing damage, because it's going to take power off their board and it's going to deal damage to the face, which when you're playing aggro control sort of equals getting another turn, because 2 damage to the face is a steady shot. And a lot of the time you're just saying, oh, I wish I had 1 more turn to push the button, but he's going to take me out. And that Explosive Trap helps you survive. So let's have a look at the most successful one, right? The 9-win aggro control. It's really difficult to draft and play because you have to sacrifice curve to pick up this tech and the reach. We can see that even though I want a good early curve, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have 9 2-mana cards, but 2 of them are hyenas, so that's not exactly something you want to play on curve. And then we have Hawksteed, Blowgill, so those are also 2 cards which is a little shaky on curve, although Hawksteed's usually fine. Then turn 3 we have Smuggler, Sneak, and 2 Amalgams, so 4 3-drops, that's sort of just right. That's about all you can afford. Then turn 4 we have Vargoth, Dispatch Kodo, that's it. No Marked Shot in this deck, but I do like picking it. I think I just had 3 Marked Shots up against 3 Unleashes, or at least 2 Marked Shots against the Unleashes. And Unleash is still nuts, especially for this archetype, because Unleash helps you stay alive. It can ping off 1 health or 2 health minions, and it's phase damage in the end. So those are 2 things that you value super highly when you're playing aggro control. Now, I have a rule when I'm drafting aggro control, for now at least, that any minion I draft that is 5 mana or more, it has to have one of 3 things for me to even consider it. That doesn't mean that you always pick it when they have this, but it needs to have one of 3 things. The first would be reach. If it's got initiative, if it's let's say an Argent Commander, that's obviously really nice. So let's call it initiative / reach. The second one, that includes Unleash the Beast, by the way. Unleash the Beast, you can play, it can trade into something, and then you can hero power. So generally speaking, this deck plays Unleash the Beast on turn 8 when you compare it with a hero power. The other one would be Stealth, because it's like second-rate reach. It's slow reach because you stealth and then you give them time to, I don't know, maybe freeze with like a blizzard. You give them time to taunt. So it's not guaranteed reach, but it's still a whole lot better than playing, say, a Dalaran Crusader and having it get traded into or whatnot. And then the last one will be Taunt, because Taunt allows you to stay alive as you're trying to finish them off with your reach. So if an expensive minion, in terms of this deck, expensive would be 5 or more mana, does not have one of these 3 things, I generally speaking won't pick it. So that means no Scribes, no Highmanes. Now, why don't I pick these minions for this style? It's because you're giving up the board, because your deck is early game and then it's reach and tech. So you're gonna have fairly few 4 drops, 5 drops, 6 drops anyways. So at that point, you're going to be weaving him hero powers here and there. You're expected to fall behind on the board. When you fall behind on the board, it's very easy for your opponent, say you play Dollar Crusader, it's very easy for them to deal with it because they're going to have leftover tokens, so the shield is pretty much already forfeit. They have an easier time taunting it out, or they can use a removal spell on it or whatnot. It's just that you're going to sink 5 or 6 mana into a card, and you're going to get very little return off it because you don't have the board anymore. So you want it to taunt to keep you alive, you want Unleash the Beast, right, to also keep you alive, or you want, say, a Stranglethorn Tiger, which has a much higher chance of connecting to the face, because that's what you're trying to do at that point. You're trying to deal as much face damage as you can. So I'll probably include this in the meta report, but I'm not sure yet, because it's a bit more of a fancy thing. It's more for fun, because you can reliably draft mid-range and it works just fine. So it might be a little bit too confusing, but for those of you Hunter lovers and they want to try out something that they haven't done before, try it out. I'll quickly show you guys the list so you can pause if you would like to replicate them. You can see 3 kill commands, reach is premium when you're drafting these kind of decks. So AoE, reach, early curve, that's what it's all about. So this was the 9-win one, and then the 2 7s, you can see good early game here. Even a leopard just because it's reach. Explosive traps, try to keep you alive. Marked shots in this one, because marked shot is still good. It's a reactive thing that can then pull more reach or more reactive stuff to keep you alive. This curve was pretty nuts. It was just 1 to 4 and then a Windrunner. And Windrunner was just the best one of the pack, and at least it has a little bit of reach attached to it because the weapon and sometimes the spell power is relevant. And then this deck, yeah, you can see it here as well, right? Also pretty low curve. We can see Knuckles, because Knuckles is sort of a exception, because if it does get taunted out, it can still go face. So Knuckles does belong in that, I guess, initiative category, even though it's not really initiative, but it just punches into the taunt and deals face. So Knuckles is an exception. Then we have the Tiger and War Mage. War Mage pings phase damage, of course, if you do get call or you pull something from the marks. All right, moving on, right? So that's my little baby, I would say, right? I've always been enjoying these kind of hunters, and I feel like Marked Shot has made it viable again. Then the Mage. I'm not really going to be talking too much about Priest just because I have not played it yet. I am going to test it, of course, but it does look solid. Anyways, we'll get to that. So Mage, this is a draft we did that went 12 on Sunday as well. It didn't look that special, right? You look at this Mage deck and it's not like it's terrible. Although when I was drafting it, it felt like I was really missing out on something, right? Conjure's Calling, I suppose, because yeah, it had AoE, but I had to pick the Ranged Doctor just for a thing. Right, I had to pick the Acolyte just to get a little bit more card draw, but it ended up working quite well. You can see it took a long time before we even took our first loss. It just, yeah, it just did not get wrecked on the board because you had those 2 Flame Callers, you had Volcanic Potion, then you had a Corrupted Seer and a Flame Strike. So, and then Cone of Cold as well, I suppose. So lots and lots of small AoE damage. That seems to be working quite well. So picking Flamecaller quite highly, picking Volcanic Potion quite highly, even Arcane Explosion's probably pretty good right now. And then you don't have to pick like Flame Strike later on, but there was just a Flame Strike in a pack. I think it was Flame Strike Blizzard and something that I didn't really want. So I was like, well, I'll just take the Flame Strike. And it's not like Flame Strike was useless, but there were definitely games where I had a Flame Strike and I'm like, well, I really don't need this here. An overperformer, I would say, would be the Exotic Mount Seller, because I picked Magic Trick in the hopes of finding a Conjure's Calling, which did not happen the entire run. But you can go Magic Trick into Ray of Frost, into double Ray of Frost, and it's just, you spawn so many beasts so fast. So for Mage right now, I'm very, very impressed with Exotic Mount Seller. I already knew it was a good card, and I liked it before, but I would say it's a really, really good card for now for Mage, especially when you have something like Magic Trick. We also had Freezing Potion, which was not too bad. I'm going to experiment more with stuff like Ray of Frost. Just pick Ray of Frost higher because especially when somebody plays a Scribe, an Eccentric Scribe, and you lock that up for a turn and then the next turn you just freeze it again, that's 2 whole turns their Scribe can't do anything. Like, that may as well have been a sap for those 2 turns. And a lot of the time you kill them before they can use the Scribe. So very annoying. So I'll definitely be experimenting with that more. But you can see this is pretty much what it looked like. When I'm playing Mage right now, I'm not focusing too much on getting 1s or 2s. You can see it's a very different curve from the Hunter. That is because we do have those small sources of AoE, which are very necessary if you're not going to curve out that well. You're going to need something to deal with your opponents being aggressive, especially if, you know, it's a Warlock and they get Evil Genius, and then they get the Lackey that spawns a 2-drop. If you have a Flame Color to deal with that, you're feeling a lot better already. So for Mage, we go a little bit back to the previous curve, the curve we had in the previous expansion. I like just stacking spider tanks and, you know, messing around on turn 1, turn 2. Just play Cable Rat on turn 2. Oh, that's more than fine for me. Sometimes I pulled my Haunted Creeper or my Librarian and then it's fine. But you can see for this deck we were definitely not chasing any 2-drops. We have 1 Creeper and 1 Librarian as real 2-drops. And then there's a Cable Rat. Even the 3s aren't all that. We do have 1 Mystic, which is the Spider Tank. And then Cobra, which I guess could be the equivalent just because it kills everything. But yeah, even the 3s were not that fleshed out. But I do think that, you know, you still pick a lot of Spider Tanks if you can. But then turn 4, that was a big one. A lot of the time I went coin 4-drops, or, you know, I played a 3 into a 4 if I was not on the coin. 2 Yetis and 2 Soldiers of Fortune. Felt so good right now. I'm a really big fan of Soldier of Fortune and Yeti. Those 2 4-drops for me just perform so well because they're almost always going to kill 2 cards, or they're going to kill a card and then require your opponents to sink in additional mana or resources to deal with the remainder of the body. And with Soldier of Fortune, they rarely even want to kill it. So something that happened a lot was coin Soldier of Fortune into Faceless Shambler. It's just super strong. I was very happy with that. I was not happy with the Shambler in the draft, but I was pretty happy with when I saw it in action. Coin Soldier of Fortune into Shambler claimed a lot of games. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So lots of sources of small AoE, and then a couple cards to try and finish the game off with. We have, like I said, I picked this Doctor just because I needed a thing. I needed something to hit them in the face with, which is what the Doctor did a lot of the time. And then Mount Seller was very nice. So Mount Seller, I don't think I'll be skipping that in Mage. Scribe is also fine, right? Just a couple things to finish off the game with. So in this case, that was the Doctor, the Mount Seller, and the Scribe. And then those powerful mid-game, mid-rangey cards like Yetis and Soldiers to, you know, do everything you need them to do in the mid-game. All right, and then yeah, the Magic Trick, especially in combination with the Mount Seller, felt very strong. Then we'll cover Priest briefly, just if you have not seen any of my other meta reports, and we did not talk about, we have not seen any Priests yet. The way how Priest feels right now is you just pick Henchclan's Shadequill, the 4-mana 4/7, and you pick Talon Priest, and you stick things on the board and buff them, and you take it from there. So a specific thing that I've been liking is pick up 1 Shadow Word Death if I can. So I try to pick that over Mind Control right now because the Priest deck that I usually like to play, I will say that, and this is why I have not been playing Priest so much, is I really dislike Priest when it plays like this because I feel like I have very little say in the game. I slam my minions on the board and they either kill them or they don't. And if they don't kill them, I will buff them further. And if they kill them, I will probably lose. That's how Priest feels right now. Now, because your minions are overstated, you are playing a 4-mana 4/7. You are playing a Talon Priest. So the chance that your minions do get cleared is pretty low. So Priest does well for that reason. I just don't like the way how that dynamic works. You know, I play cards, they either kill them or they don't. And based on that, I'm going to do well or not. But especially with Rogue getting a lot weaker right now, the chance that your minions stick does increase. Rogue's one of the classes with backstab SI agent that can just kill stuff out of nowhere, even the 4/7, or they can sap it later on. But anyways, what I do know about Priest right now, pick Talon Priest, pick the 4/7, pick Death over Mind Control, early at least, right? And then you can still pick Shovel Fists later in the game. Now, a specific thing that I have not really tested yet, but I will be testing, that is on the advice of Sun Glitters, as you know, some of you may know her, very good arena player. To pick the 4 mana, I don't even know its name, but it's the 4 mana spell that silences your minion and then summons a copy of it. So she likes to combo that with a Hengeclan Shadequill or a Soldier of Fortune, or even the 5/8 elemental that can't attack if it's damaged. Because obviously silencing that thing is really good, and then you spawn a copy of it. So now I'm not gonna endorse that yet until I have tried it properly. The 5 mana 5/8 that is, because the card is pretty bad on its own. But yeah, feel free to give that a go, especially if you already have Shadequills or Soldiers. Add the 4 mana silence card to your deck and see how that goes. But yeah, as I said, I'm not going to talk about Priest too much. This is just a deck to show you guys. If you do want to draft Priest, this is what I ended up with. This Mind Control was drafted after we had deaths already, because I felt like I needed a bit more stuff in the late game. All right, and then the last one, Paladin. Now, for Paladin, I do have a little bit of a curveball here, because I did play 2 Paladins. You can see both of these. There was actually, sorry, you can't properly see it, but this was a deck I drafted at the start of the day, which went 7, which was respectable, nothing too bad. So very standard-esque Paladin, just curve, and then True Silver, and then Silver Sword at the end, and then Ghostly Chargers. But the Paladin deck I want to talk about with you guys is something from another streamer, Deck and Kata. He recommended to me that I would try Hand Buff Paladin. I was like, come on, Deck, how good can that be? Isn't that a big meme? And yeah, I just picked all the hand buffs and it was pretty easy 12. So I was like, okay, this thing, and it was very enjoyable to play as well. So how did I structure the deck? Grime Street Outfitter is going to feel like a card you can never pick because it's going to be next to Silver Sword. But I was like, how bad can it be, right? I'll just draft it. If I hate it, I'll retire it. And I picked the Outfitter over the Silver Sword. I picked the, the Grime Street Enforcer over a Batterhead, which is not like super crazy, but still Batterhead's not a bad card. I picked Smuggler's Run, a card I normally never pick. And then to go with that, I drafted the Bronze Heralds to give me, you know what they do, right? They put the Heralds in their hand and then they buff it. Now, a specific thing that I valued very, very highly, and might already see it if you're looking at the deck list, is, let me move it up a little bit here so the ad isn't blocking the bottom of the deck. A specific one is the presence of Taunt. I really, really valued Taunt highly. Like, I have 2 safeguards, Furious Etten, Witchwood Grizzly, Proud Defender, and maybe there's 1 or 2 more. But we also have Lay on Hands later in the game, because if you are playing a hand buff deck, you will by definition play understated minions, because this is the 2 mana 1/1. You're playing 1 mana, quote unquote do nothing, right? You're not doing anything on the board. So you do fall behind for a little bit, and then you need to stabilize. So then spamming Taunt minions allows you to stabilize while you're not dying, because if you don't have any Taunt minions after your hand buff, generally speaking, you just get hit in the face and you lose. So that was a game changer, I think. I think a lot of people have tried the hand buff thing, but then they don't pick so many taunts to try and stabilize afterwards, and they end up just dying the moment their opponent realizes, hey, I can just hit them in the face. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. Those are the 5 classes that I would say you can try out right now. I have played Druid, I have played Warrior, and they were fine, right? I think I had 7-win Druid, 8-win Druid, 7-win Warrior. But it felt like I had to work more. Those games were tougher. So I don't want to recommend that right now, because I feel like my experience as a player does carry those games for me, where I'm like, man, I really had to, outplay my opponent, to really like find a way to win here or there. So I think there is potential in those classes, and if you want to try them out, you definitely can. But I can't tell you that they're going to be better than the 5 classes we just covered. So while I don't think that they are unplayable right now by any means, I think they are still weaker than, you know, say the 5 classes we covered. So keep an eye out for the actual meta report. I'm hoping to have that out, but I'm not going to give you a date because then I'm going to be locked down. But we were really waiting until the micro adjust came in, and they have now. So now I can start properly testing, and hopefully we're going to have a stable and good meta for the remainder of the season. And then in about a month's time, we're going to have another rotation, and it's going to be a whole other pile of sets that they will bring into the arena. So looking forward to that already. Exciting times to be playing arena for sure. All right, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.